starting today. I have put these animals on a, half distiller grains, half total mixed ration feed, and I'm only feeding them 4 pounds of feed a day per head. So I got 24 animals out here, and I'm giving them about 100 pounds of food, and I'm giving them a half distilled grains, half total mixed ration mix. I've taken a look at the animals, and I've taken a look at the quality of the grass. And the thing about the grass right now is that this Duracore that I put down about a month ago, about 3 weeks ago, this Duracore has just like completely stopped any broadleaf plant from germinating. It's usually when I use this Duracore stuff, and every time that I use this Duracore stuff, it just turns out to be every time that I've used it, I've had a great experience with it. And this Duracore stuff, usually when I use it when the weeds are small. I use it when the weeds have already germinated and they're about 2 or 3 inches tall. But this time, just because of the way that I used it, and I did not do this intentionally, I was just doing it because I figured, it was a good time to do it. Like when I read the instructions on the bottle, when I read the instructions for the Duracore, it said to put the Duracore, on the field, and get about a half an inch of rain on it, and put 20 ounces, 20 fluid ounces per acre. And so that I did that, I did that right before it rained, and I got about exactly about a half an inch, maybe about 0.75 inches of rain on it. And it said you need to get at least a quarter inch or something like that. It was like somewhere between a quarter inch and a half an inch, and I just did what it said on the bottle. And here we are, about 3 weeks later, about a month later, and the grass is germinating all over the place. I have grass germinating all over the place. The grass that I have on the field is growing in, and I don't have I don't I have legitimately not seen like any weeds germinating at all. And this field was covered with weeds. This field had sagebrush growing in all over the place. It had little mesquite trees all over the place. Oh yeah, and all the little mesquite trees, none of them have put on any leaves. The little mesquite trees have all burned up too. I took a look at the mesquite trees, because these mesquite trees, if I put fertilizer on the ground and the mesquite trees got 2 or 3 inches of rain on it, it should start putting on new leaves very quickly. Okay, these mesquite trees, they're a very fast growing plant. And so these mesquite trees don't have any leaves on them either. They don't have. I haven't seen hardly a leaf on any of these mesquite trees, and I did see that the trees were burning up real bad. And so this Duracore stuff, it's a phenomenal. Every time I've used this Duracore product, and I don't know, I'm not like a chemical scientist. I'm just gonna say, in terms of all the herbicide that I've ever used, this Duracore stuff, it every time that I've used it, I've had a great experience with it. I'll just say that. And right now, I don't have any weeds germinating anywhere. Like I have not seen, and I still got some bigger weeds, but this field was covered with sagebrush. All right, covered with sagebrush, covered with all sorts of weeds. Had mesquite trees all over the place, and the mesquite trees have not greened up at all. The mesquite trees have actually burned up. I actually saw the mesquite trees burning up, and none of the seeds have germinated from the broadleaf plants. The broadleaf plants have not germinated at all. I have a lot of grass growing in. My grass is growing in, and I have a lot of grass germinating. I actually have annual grasses germinating in with the perennial grass. And so this Duracore stuff didn't damage the grass seed. It didn't damage the grass seed, but it did stop the broadleaves from germinating. It did. I haven't seen hardly a weed anywhere, and none of the mesquite trees have turned green at all. And my grass is growing like 2 3 inches, and by next week I would reasonably anticipate, and I got like a 50% chance of it raining every single day for like 7 out of 10 days straight. So here very soon, I should be getting a good bit of rain. And when I grow grass, the whole, and I probably don't even need to fertilize this field. I'll think about it. This field, and I'll probably just go ahead and fertilize it anyway. But, if I'm going to go up to the fertilizer yard, I really want to pick up at least 2 tons of fertilizer, because, it takes me an hour to get over there and takes me an hour to come back. And then I have to go over there a second time to drop the fertilizer, the fertilizer buggy back off. And so, It takes about 4 hours. And so if I'm gonna do that, I really want to pick up a substantial amount of fertilizer. And I'm gonna see, I'll take a look and see if I want to fertilize this week or if I want to fertilize maybe 1 month, because I'll figure it out. I'll probably just end up fertilizing the grass, just because I also want to fertilize the preconditioning facility. But I'll figure it out. Okay, I got to figure out whether I'm going to fertilize the field or not. Uh, I have plenty of grass out here. The grass is definitely germinating. I don't have any weeds coming in. All right, and I got a lot of rain coming in next week. Oh, hearing about so these animals. I took a look at them this morning, and you can see this calf right here, right? He's a pretty big one. That one pretty big. This one's pretty big, right? These calves. Hearing about well, I'll probably have about 10 or 11 calves that are ready for market in the next 2 months. So this month and next month, so November and December, I'll have about 10 calves that are ready. And but even like right now, even if I sold all the animals that I had right now and I reinvested the earnings, I'd be able to grow the size of my herd if I just reinvested my earnings. Okay, I'd be able to grow my herd by about let's give it a conservative estimate and just say 50%. I'd be able to grow the size of my herd by 50%, okay? And I'd be able to buy everything that I need. All right. Realistically, even if I just sold my 10 biggest animals, even if I just sold my 10 biggest animals, forget selling all of my animals, even if I just sold my 10 biggest animals, I'd be able to buy I'd be able to increase the size of my herd by 20% and buy everything that I need. Realistically, if I sold my 10 biggest animals, I'd have more animals ready for sale in about, 3 months, right? 2.5 months. And so if I'm thinking about running my business for the next 2.5 months, I mean, what do I realistically need? Maybe about maybe 2 or 3 tons of fertilizer. In all honesty, 2 tons of fertilizer and maybe one load of grain, maybe. All right. It depends on, because if I have a lot of grass coming in and the grass is of good quality, I've taken a look at the grass and the grass is good quality, right? I fertilized it and, I have enough biomass. I don't have weeds coming in all over the place, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, if I take a look at it and I got, a lot of grass, and then I'm only going to feed the animals a couple of pounds of grain a day each, right? If I only feed them 3 or 4 pounds a day each and they eat the rest of the diet in grass, in a good quality grass, it's not like I'm putting them on a struggle bus, right? I'm not putting my animals on a struggle bus. I'm not I'm giving the animals, and the cattle love to eat grass. Okay, if you got a good quality grass, the cattle will they're not gonna be upset that they only have grass. Okay, and but the thing about grain, and if I feed them 90% of their diet in grass, right, and I give them 3 or 4 pounds a day of grain each, that 3 or 4 pounds a day will actually put on about another half a pound. These animals will probably put on, excuse me, these animals will probably put on about 2.5 pounds a day on a good quality grass. They'll put on about 2.5 pounds a day. I got a mix of annual grass and perennial grass, middle vegetation, well fertilized, plenty of biomass. The animals will probably put on about 2.5 pounds a day eating that grass, sometimes even up to 3 pounds a day. And if I feed them just a little bit of grain, if I feed them just a little bit of grain a day, they'll put on another half a pound. I could end up putting on 3.5 pounds a day, right? And so, for the big animals, all right, I'm not going to be putting on 3.5 pounds on a little 400 or 500 pound calf. But if the animal is, 600, 700 pounds, 700, 800, 6, 7, 800 pounds, they could even put on 3.25 a day, right? When these animals, when they get bigger, they can eat more food. And the thing about putting these animals on a good quality grass is that if the grass is digestible, if the grass is I got a security camera on my truck that records when I drive, just in case something happens or something. But this whole you know yeah, the bigger the animal gets, the more they can eat, right? And so, like even right now, if I sold my 10 biggest animals, I could increase the size of my herd by 20% and I could buy everything that I need. And in all honesty, within about 2.5 months, I'd have more animals ready for sale. Okay. And so the whole thing about and the big idea of this is that even if I only grew my business, but if I only grew the size of my herd by 20%, right, a year, all right, this is something that I discuss. This is an idea that I discuss, and I always say, don't worry about money. All right, don't be concerned about money. If the only time, the only people who are concerned about money are poor people. Okay, it doesn't matter how much money you make, it doesn't matter how much money you have. All right, if you're concerned about money, there is no reason. It's like if you're concerned about money, why are you concerned about money? Figure out why is that happening? And if it's like, if it's like because you're making a whole bunch of bad choices, then focus on not making bad choices, right? I mean, I don't, money doesn't do anything, okay? It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter how much money you make. All right. The person is far more important. All right. The person is far more important. You could end up in a situation like Mr. Earl, right? I use Mr. Earl as a very good example of this. And you can also end up in a situation where you have $400 million, you have $350 million, and you gamble it all, and then you lose it all, right? I mean, I watched a documentary on a guy who had $350 million cash, and he lost all of it by gambling. All right, and I've and a majority of a majority of people just don't do well financially. Okay, this is something it just is what it is. I'm not being a doofus about it. I'm not making this up. I'm not being a jerk about it. I'm just being honest about it. A majority of people do not do well financially. Okay, this is something that it just is what it is. All right, and so if I only grew my business by 20% a year, which if I only grew my business by 20% a year, I mean, I would be ashamed of myself. All right, even right now, if I just sold my 10 biggest animals, if that was all I did, if I just sold my 10 biggest animals and I reinvested that money, I would be able to grow my business by 20%, 25%. I'd be able to grow my herd by 25% just now, okay? Because my 10 biggest animals are going to weigh somewhere between 700 and 800 pounds. My biggest animals may actually hit the scale a little bit over 800 pounds, like at 850. The Sumo Bros and the Teddy Bear Brothers may hit the scale at about 825, 850. All right. And so, and I got another set of 700-pound animals. And if I sell these, they may average out to be 800 pounds. All right. So even if I sold my 10 biggest animals right now and I didn't sell any of my other animals, I would be able to grow the size of my herd by about 20% and buy everything that I need for the next 2.5 months. And in 2.5 months, I'll have another set of animals ready to go that are effectively about 800 pounds as well. All right. So if I only grew my business by 20% a year, and my whole thing about money and the nature of the commodity market, the nature of the business that I'm in, when you take a look at my business, I'm in the commodity business, and the commodity market is a very good barometer for what is going on with the dollar. All right, the commodity market is a very good barometer for what is happening with the fiscal situation. Not even the dollar. There are many paper currencies across the world and et cetera, et cetera. But I'm in the United States of America, and let's just be honest about it. Well, I mean, let's just it just is what it is, right? The dollar is the number one currency in the world, right? The dollar is all right. The dollar is the top currency in the world, and so when we take a look at the price of commodities, it's a very good barometer for what is happening with the dollar. If the dollar is losing its value, if the dollar is if you need if the dollar is losing its value, right? The monetary supply is expanding, right? That's what I call, and that's the monetary supply expanding is effectively inflation, right? If there is inflation, if the monetary supply is expanding, right? I described this idea, the way to think about this, one way to think about this is to think about it in terms of the economy as cash and the things that you can buy with cash. All right, think about it in terms of cash and the things you can buy with cash. If there is more cash in the world, if there is more money in the world, if there is more cash in the world, then the things that you can buy with cash, there will be more money chasing the same amount of goods. Right? I've discussed this idea. You cannot print assets. You cannot print assets. That's one of the big it just is what it is. You cannot print assets. You can print money, but you cannot print assets. So if you print money, but the number of assets in the world are the same, that money will be chasing the increased amount of money will be chasing the same number of assets, and it will drive the price of assets upwards, right? And so think about it in terms of cattle, right? If there is more money in the system, if there is more money just in the economy, right? Then the price of cattle will probably also go upwards. And another way to think about this is if there is broader inflation, then chances are if just about everything is going up in value, chances if everything is going up in monetary cost, chances are the price of beef will also be going upwards. All right. And my whole thing with what I got going on is even if I only expanded the size of my herd by 20% a year, if that was all I did, first of all, I would be ashamed of myself because it's like what did I do with the rest of my money? Right? I mean, what how in the world did I only manage to do 20%? If I only expanded the size of my herd by 20% a year, right now, if I only expanded the size of my herd by 20%, I would be ashamed of myself. Legitimately, I would be ashamed of myself. All right? That wouldn't be a good situation. It's like, what the heck did I do? I mean, I must have messed up horribly. But even if I only expand the size of my herd by 20% a year, even if I only did that, I would still end up making a boatload of money. I'm gonna just be honest about it. I would still end up making a boatload of money. All right. It would be more money than I could ever use in my entire life. All right. So, the whole thing about it, you know, and the reason, okay, and so one of the big things that I discuss is that, and I've even said it like in this video, right? The whole idea of commodities as a barometer for the dollar, right? Commodities are a good barometer for the dollar. Chances are, a beef cattle in 50 years, we are still going to be eating beef. Chances are, humanity will still be eating beef in 50 years, and the chances are that in 50, but it doesn't matter to me. And why does the price not matter to me? The price does not matter to me because if I have more assets, then even if the price falls, which I don't think it will, okay, there's a very legitimate the whole idea of the legitimate possibility of the price of beef going upwards is that 10 years ago, I would buy a steak for $8 to $10 a pound. All right, a choice steak. If I went to the grocery store and I found a choice steak and it wasn't on sale, I'd pay about $10 a pound for it. And if it was on sale, I'd pay about $8 a pound for it. And right now, when I go to the grocery store, the price of steak is almost $14 a pound. All right, so that's about somewhere between a 40 and 60% increase in the price over the last 10 years. All right, 10 years, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I'm 34, so 10 years ago would have been 24, 15 would have been 19. So yeah, when I was about 19 to 24 years old, I used to go to the grocery store and buy a steak, and that steak would effectively be about $8 or $10 a pound. And right now, when I go to the grocery store, it's about 12 to 14. So we're talking about a 50% inflation in the price of beef. The price of beef went up about 50% in the last 15 years. But it's not just the price of beef, right? Homes went up. When I was 19 years old, when I was 24 years old, I used to pay rent used to be about $700 for a pretty decent place. And right now, for a pretty decent place, rent is like $1,200. So there, everything went up. It wasn't just the price of beef. And that's also what I mean by broader inflation. And there is a legitimate possibility that this continues to happen. Right now, beef may be $14 a pound. And in 15 years, beef Right now beef may be 12, $14 a pound, and in 15 years beef may be 16, $17 a pound. All right? But not only will beef be 15, $16 a pound, rent will also probably be, I don't know, $1,500, $1,700. And also the people, it's like, and I use the idea of working at McDonald's, right? Because when I was 15 years old, I used to work at McDonald's. And that's where I started, right? When I was 15, I worked at McDonald's and I made $7.25 a pound. Or not, excuse me, not a pound, per hour. When I was working at McDonald's at 15 years old, I used to make $7.25 an hour. And nowadays, like when I go to McDonald's and I buy myself something to eat, they got little flyers out, and they're hiring, and they show you the wages, and their wages are starting at like $14 an hour. So even that, even McDonald's is effectively paying twice as much today as they were when I was 15 years old. About 19 years ago. When I was 15, that was 19 years ago. And they used to pay $7.25 an hour. And I used to work that job. And nowadays they pay about twice that. They pay about $14 an hour. All right. And so there's a very legitimate possibility that even McDonald's, in 15 years, they're not paying people $14 an hour anymore. Maybe they're paying people $20 an hour, right? But everything would have gone up. All right. And this is also the big idea that good assets are a hedge for inflation. Why are good assets a hedge for inflation? Because they are worth money. They will always be worth money. Good assets should produce you some kind of a return, and you cannot print assets. That's why. You can print dollars, but you cannot print assets. And if you print dollars and you do not print assets, you will increase the amount of money that is chasing the assets, and that will drive up the price. That's why assets are a good hedge for inflation. And I've discussed this idea of the having a $500,000 property, and you don't need to sell the property yesterday, right? And this is but let's take this to an extreme example. Let's say that instead of 500, but if I take it to an extreme example, I think people are just gonna, their eyes are just gonna roll into the back of their head. So I'm not gonna do that. Oh, I was gonna talk about in terms of the idea of 500 million. But I mean, and then I don't want people's eyes rolling into the back of their head. But understand that if you have something that's worth $500,000, right? Particularly land. Land is something that I speak to the bankers about very frequently. Land is something that I talk to the bankers about, very often. And so the loan conditions for land, I'm pretty well informed on it. And the terms and the conditions, and the amount that they'll give you, these are things that I know just from firsthand experience. It's not like the stock market. I don't know about leveraging against the equity of your company or anything like that. But I do know about land. Okay. And and I actually, if you have a $500,000 property, and but here's the big thing. All right, if you have a $500,000 property, all right, let's say you got a $500,000 property, and that property is making you $10,000 a month, and you got and you go to the bank and you say, "Hey, banker, I'm looking to take a loan against this property," right? And so they give you a 20-year loan for 7% interest, and it's interest only, okay, for 80% of the land, 800,000. Oh, for 400,000, okay, for 80%. So they give you a $400,000 loan, and you use all the money, right? And for that money, you will pay 7% interest a year, which will be $28,000 a year, right? If you in my situation, if I take that 400 grand and I invest that money, and that money makes me and I turn that I make a profit on that money. Let's say I take that $400,000 and I make $8,000 a month with it, right? So I had a $500,000 property, and I was making $10,000 a month on that $500,000 property, right? And so I took a $400,000 loan against my $800,000 property. I paid $28,000 a year for it, 7% or 7% interest for 20 years, interest only. All right, so that's $28,000 a year. And I took that $400,000 and I went and I bought myself another $400,000 property, and that property makes me $8,000 a year. Now I make $18,000 a year, or excuse me, I make $18,000 a month, right? Not a year. I make $18,000 a month, and I owe the bank $2,400 a month. So I just take the $2,400 a month out of the $18,000 that I made from my investments. All right, that still leaves me with like $15,600, right? So I would still be able to increase the amount of money that I make. And that's the big idea for what I'm looking to do, right? I am looking to use the capital that I have saved up. I have capital that I've put away in my various investments, like in my cattle and my land. And I am looking to utilize that capital simply because, like, when I take a look at what I'm doing right now, when I take a look at what I'm doing right now, even if I don't use any loans, even if I do not use any leverage at all, I am, even if I do not use any leverage at all, like right now, if I just sold my 10 biggest animals and reinvested the money, I could grow the size of my herd by 20% today. All right. And I could buy everything that I needed for the next 2.5 months. And in 2.5 months, I would have another set of animals ready to go. When I take a look at what I'm doing, right now I'm selling 5 animals a month. Here in about 5 to 7 months, here in about 5 months, 7 months, something like that, I'll be selling 10 animals a month. All right. And so, you know, uh, even if I had nothing, right, I could just redo it all. And even right now, I don't have any monetary problems. I don't have any monetary issues. I don't have any trials. I don't have any tribulations. And my big, big problem with this is that I am not putting in any effort. I'm serious about this. I'm maybe putting in 5% effort, maybe 5%. And my whole thing about it is, me at 34 years old, you know, I could split my chops open for the next 20 years and I wouldn't even pull a muscle. All right. I wouldn't even hurt my back. I have it in me to, I have it in me to put in some more effort. I need to put in more effort. All right. I can't be sitting here putting in 5% effort, making $700,000 a year. That's not good. It's not going to do anything for anybody. Okay. You know, uh, but realistically, but in all honesty, even now, I don't have any monetary problems. Even now, I don't have any monetary problems. And in all honesty, even if all I did was this for the rest of my life, I would still be able to make enough money to never worry about money again, even just doing this. All right. Granted that, and I wouldn't even be on a struggle bus. I wouldn't even be on a struggle bus. I wouldn't be struggling for anything. I would be able to effectively buy anything on the entire planet and I would not be concerned about it. All right. So I'm not, I am looking to I'm looking to push myself. I know I can. I'm telling you right now, I'm putting in maybe 5% effort, maybe 5%. All right, and here starting within about 5 to 7 months, I won't be selling 5 cattle a month anymore. I'll be selling 10. All right, and then it'll go to 20, and then it'll go to 40, and then it might even jump up to whatever. It may jump up from 20 to 80. By next. Simply because I am looking to leverage against my balance sheet. But even right now, if all I did was reinvest my earnings, and I didn't use any debt, and I put in 5% effort, I would still be able to grow my balance sheet by like 20%. All right, 10% a month, compounding. And what that looks like is right now I sell 5 animals a month. And in 5 months, I'd be selling 10 animals a month. In 7 months, I'd be selling 10 animals a month. And then by, later, late next year, I'd be selling whatever. I'd be selling 20 or 40 animals, 20, 25, whatever it may be, animals a month. All right. And that would be with me just leveraging against, not even leveraging, excuse me. That would be with me using zero debt. If I used zero debt and just reinvested my earnings back into my business and just whatever, it's like if my business makes whatever, if I just did that for the next 365 days, if I just did that for the next 365 days, even then I would get to a point where I am effectively selling about 25 cattle a month, even in just the next year. But there's a, but I am going to be leveraging against my balance sheet. I am going to be leveraging against a portion of my earnings, right? I have a new leverage system, and it's going to be a lot easier for me to keep track of how much leverage I need to use. And there's a very legitimate possibility that by the end of next year, I'm liquidating 80 cattle a month. It may even be like 100 or 120 a month. All right, there's a very legitimate possibility of that happening, and I'm not going to be anywhere near financial hot water. All right, when I take loans from the bank, I don't just take loans to go on magical journeys, right? I don't take loans to do ridiculous things. My whole thing about it is I take the loans and I purchase more assets. I make a return on those assets, and the assets are equitable. So even if the bank told me that they needed all their money back, I could just liquidate the assets that the bank lent me money for and pay the bank back. I don't do ridiculous things with money. All right, I don't do ridiculous things with money. I have I have a very systematic way of how I use leverage. Okay, and I'm not, my whole thing about it is I don't recommend anybody leverage themselves to the eyeballs. That's not what I'm talking about. Don't leverage yourself to the eyeballs. My whole thing about money is if you legitimately think you need money to make money, that's not good. That's wrong. All right, that is fundamentally incorrect, and you could end up actually putting yourself in a situation where I call being poor forever. If you legitimately think that, okay, because you don't want to be in a situation where you think that you need money to make money, and then you go and you leverage yourself to the eyeballs, and then throw a hail mary into the middle of nowhere, and then and then now you have nothing, and that's what I call being poor forever, right? There are several ways to end up being poor forever, and that's one of them. Like, you legitimately leverage yourself to the eyeballs, you throw a hail mary into the middle of nowhere, and then you end up with nothing. That is a realistic way for you to end up poor forever. Another way to end up poor forever is you miss every opportunity in your entire life. If you miss every opportunity in your entire life, like you're legitimately going 180 degrees in the wrong direction, that's another way to be poor forever. All right. There are multiple ways to be poor forever. All right. And that's one of them. If you legitimately think you need money to make money, and you go and you leverage yourself to the eyeballs, and you launch a Hail Mary into the middle of nowhere, you could end up poor forever. You will legitimately go from being poor today to being poor for all eternity. You won't be able to escape you won't be able to, you'll be poor forever if you do that. All right. You know, but yeah, why my whole thing about money is I make such a I make such a large amount of money. Okay, let's just be honest about it. I make a very large amount of money, and in my income, the amount of money that I make is going up all the time. All right, it's going up all the time. And my whole thing about money is, it's like, why would I'm not going to take a 20% risk to do everything in a year when I can just do it in 2 years. And either which way, I'm going to be rich the entire time. Okay. I'm going to be extremely well off financially the entire time. You know, my income may actually start to hit somewhere around, I'm just gonna say it. I'm, well, the thing about it is I'm just gonna be rich the entire time. So why would I risk it, right? I'm not gonna risk it. I'm gonna take there's no reason to take a 20% more risk. Okay, there is no reason for me to take 20% more risk. Why would I take 20% more risk? All right, and it's negligible either way. All right, even if I only grew my business by 20% a year, if I only grew my business by 20% a year, I would still make a boatload of money. All right. So what does it matter? All right. And if I only grew my business by 20% a year and I was using zero leverage, I mean, I would be ashamed of myself. Okay. I'm not going to be growing my business. But if I only grew my business by 20% a year, that would not be good. Okay. But even if that was all I did, I would still end up making a boatload of money. All right. So what does it matter? I'm rich either way. I'm extremely well off financially. My financials are going upwards very quickly. I do very well for myself. Okay, why would I risk it, right? I'm just gonna, and I'll get there in 2 years. Okay, and I'm not concerned about it either which way. I'm gonna be rich the entire time. I'm gonna be very well off financially the entire time. Okay,